hit the music here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Closer Encounters Live with special guest, Gary David. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Closer Encounters Live. As you know, today we have a very special guest all the way from Arizona. And we have Mr. Gary David with us here today. And this guest that we have needs no introduction, obviously. You know, I've talked about him a lot, posted about him. Amazing author, and you know, he does a lot about the Hopi Indians and stuff like that, and that's what we're going to get into today. Those that are just joining us here, as you notice, I am on the laptop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this in front of the screen so you can actually see who we're talking to, and we're going to welcome Mr. Gary David. Hello, Gary. How are you, sir?
Hello, Clarence. Good to be here.
Fantastic. Yeah. Ever since that first post I seen you in on the video, I was just like, wow, this is a guy that I really have to talk to. He really knows his stuff. And I was just so excited, like I am now. And just amazing the insight that you had on the Hopi and the, you know, and all of the things that they do and stuff like that. And I just, if you would, could you give us a background on how it all started for you and, you know, where you're at now? And
Oh, sure. I'm in southern Arizona now. I'm in Tucson, Arizona. I've lived down here about a year and a half in southern Arizona, but before that, I lived in northern Arizona for over 20 years and went to many times to the Hopi Reservation and the Navajo Reservation in northern Arizona and visited some of the ceremonies that the Hopi performed, the Kachina dances and so forth. And, you know, I got interested in, you might call it archaeoastronomy, but this kind of predates my time in Arizona. I'd have to go back to the 80s, in fact. And I was living in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And I was working with the Lakota Sioux there in South Dakota. And I met a woman named Charlotte Black Elk, and she was interested in correlating different spots in the Black Hills, which is the sacred land for the Lakota. She was interested in correlating some of these sacred spots to various constellations in the heavens. And it's the old adage, as above, so below. You know, that she was working with that premise, and in fact, she was trying to prove via a buffalo hide that she had that the Lakota had been in the Black Hills for thousands of years, not the hundreds of years that mainstream historians claim that the Sioux were in that area, just a few centuries, you know. In fact, the mainstream academic people claim that the Lakota moved from your area in Minnesota, right?
Minnesota, yes, exactly.
Yeah, they moved from Minnesota across the plains there and over to the western South Dakota. But no, Charlotte was saying, and Charlotte was the great-granddaughter of the famous Nicholas Black Elk, who wrote the book Black Elk Speaks, the famous Native American classic. If anybody is interested in Native American ceremonies, check out Black Elk Speaks, because it's a great visionary work about the Black Hills and about that surrounding area, which the Lakota saw as a sacred center themselves. It was a sacred mountain, Harney Peak, at the center of the Black Hills. And Charlotte was interested in correlating the stars, mainly the constellations of Orion, Sirius, and Canis Major, to various spots in the Black Hills. And she had, like I said, she had this buffalo hide star map, and she was proving via precession of the equinoxes, you know, the slow movement of the stars through the centuries. You know, the stars kind of shift around through the centuries, and she was showing on her map, on her star map, that the constellations were in certain positions that proved the Lakota were in the area for thousands of years, not the hundreds that mainstream academic people. Right. So, you know, this idea of you know, the heavens reflecting places on the earth really you know, got me started thinking about the way that the earth mirrors the sky, and ancient people knew this, and they sought out certain sacred areas, and they correlated them to various stars. In particular, Orion's belt is the famous star, famous in many tribes in the Southwest and in the U.S. in general. They point to Orion as a major force in their cosmology.
Right.
So I moved out to Arizona in 1994. And I started going to some Kachina dances on the Hopi reservation. Now, the Hopi live in these, they call them pueblos. They're kind of like a stone apartment buildings. And they've been there for over 1,000 years in the same place. So some of these villages are the oldest continuously inhabited villages in the United States.
Wow.
Being there for centuries, you know, they've lived in the same places for many hundreds of years. Before that time, the Hopi migrated around the Southwest, around Arizona and Colorado, and my new book talks about them even going as far east as the Atlantic Ocean and going down into Central America and perhaps even South America. Going up into Canada, and they went west to the Pacific Ocean. So the Hopi, you know, before they settled in northern Arizona, they traveled around. They migrated different places, and it took them centuries to do this migration ritual. In fact, it was kind of a purification via migration, because they needed to find their center place, but before they could settle down, they had to do these migrations across the U.S.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, I just want to ask you, how many people would be in this migration as they moved?
Well, there would be hundreds of people. The Hopi are an interesting tribe in that they are not a monolithic tribe per se. The way they came together, they came out of the Grand Canyon. That's their myth.
Right.
They climbed up out of the Grand Canyon and started to populate the Colorado Plateau. However, they came from different directions, all the four directions, and they came together at this center place,
wow,
which is the three Hopi Mesas in northern Arizona. So some clans came from the south, others came from the east, others came from the west, and some came from the north. So, and they kind of met together and formed these villages. And now there are about a dozen stone pueblos on the villages, on the mesas. There are three primary mesas. And, this...
That's pretty interesting. I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
sure.
When you say there was three different tribes that met together, did they all know that they were all Hopi?
They were all destined to meet together. They were working on a spiritual wavelength that told them to come together at this central place, and they call it the Tawana Sabi, the center of the world. And it's much like the center of the world in the Black Hills. It's a sacred center. Harney Peak is the center of the Black Hills, and that's where Black Elk had his famous vision. Native people, really respect the idea of having a center of their cosmology, a center of their land.
Yes.
That they can look to. It sometimes is a mountain. In the case of the Hopi, it's these three mesas that they built villages both at the base of the mesas and on top of the mesas. So, they came together from all different directions, and I think they were following kind of a spiritual signal from their god Tawa, which represents a sun god, and Tawa is considered the creator of the Hopi,
right?
Considered the main deity in the Hopi pantheon, and they were also following a creature called Masao. Masao is a strange-looking creature, and I've published artistic renditions of this deity in some of my books, and he's a really spooky-looking deity. He's got, big round eyes and a big head,
right,
and he kind of bumpy skin, and his skin is gray. He's gray, and he's got these big round mouth, and he's got real kind of spindly arms and legs. And in fact, the Hopi word Masao, the root of the word, the name is M-A-S. That's literally means gray. And if you look at some of the, there have been oral descriptions of this god, very specific descriptions, and artists have done renditions of what the descriptions, what these descriptions were of this god Masao. And it actually does look like an extraterrestrial gray, what we would consider an extraterrestrial. And Meza was the god of the earth plane, but he was also the god of the underworld. So, you go down into the earth after you die, you would go into the earth. Now, you don't go up into heaven, you go down into the earth.
Correct.
And back into the Grand Canyon, in fact. That's where the Hopi believe that their spirits go after they die. They descend into the Grand Canyon, and they go through what's called a Sipapu or Sipapuni. Now, Sipapuni is the place that they came out of originally to come into this fourth world. We're currently living in the fourth world.
Oh, okay.
But when you die, you go back to this place. So you go back to your origins, to your third world origins, and go down this. It's called a Sipapuni, and it's an actual geological feature in the Grand Canyon, and you can see this on Google Earth.
Right.
It's about a couple miles upstream on the Little Colorado River before it meets the main part of the Colorado River in Grand Canyon. So, you can find it on Google Earth. It's on the north bank of the Little Colorado River, and it looks like it's a huge dome made out of limestone. They call it a travertine dome that build up through mineral waters through the years. And there's a big hole in the top of it, and you look down into it and you can see water in this hole. And this is the place where the Hopi say that they came up out of.
Oh my goodness! So it kind of represents like an ant mound. Is that where part of that comes from?
That whole, it does very much look like an ant mound.
Yeah.
And of course, the ant people, the Hopi have a special relationship to the ant people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen rock carvings on the cliff walls of these ant people, and they have kind of antennas sticking out, and they have spindly arms and legs like ants do, and kind of related to Meza in a way, but different, because these are different creatures. They were benevolent creatures that helped the Hopi survive 2 different cataclysms. Okay, according to the Hopi, the world has been created and destroyed 4 different times.
And we're on the fourth time now?
Yeah, we're in the 4th world right now.
Okay.
The first world was destroyed by fire, some kind of asteroid strike or comet strike, and a lot of volcanism was connected with this,
Wow.
But it was a massive cataclysm, and the scientists have recently discovered that a giant comet hit the North American continent about 12,800 years ago.
Wow.
This was a major upheaval of this continent, and it probably hit in somewhere around Canada, southern Canada. But the glaciers, we had at that time, 12,800 years ago, we had massive glaciers. Mm-hmm. So the asteroid or comet hit these glaciers, but didn't leave any kind of crater. It just hit the ice and kind of sunk into the ice, but didn't leave a crater in the earth. That's why we don't see a crater connected with this massive cataclysm that ended the first world.
Could they be talking about the actual one that killed off the dinosaur? Because the only reason I ask this is because a lot of people believe that man existed back then. Whether or not that's true or not is yet to be seen. But I mean, that's a long time, 65 million years or better.
Right. Yeah, that's the KT event that happened. And the crater down there, they found the crater. It's off the Yucatan Peninsula and
correct.
Partially on the Yucatan Peninsula. Mm-hmm. So I think that was a different event that happened 65 million years ago.
Okay.
But this happened 12,800 years ago, and
not really that long ago. Then actually, it seems pretty. It seems pretty fresh.
Yeah, and we've seen the Clovis points. The scientists, the archaeologists have dug up Clovis points, and they were sticking in mastodon bones and so forth. So definitely, there's a lot of evidence that humans were on the North American continent during this time, during the time of this great cataclysm.
Okay.
And in the state of Washington, there are massive, they're called the scab lands, and there's been massive erosion connected with this comet strike. And just a massive amount of water went down the Columbia River gorge there and just kind of scoured the whole landscape out. So this was a major event in these people's lives, and it's recorded in a lot of the different myths of these native peoples. The Hopi have, of course, the cataclysm by fire of the first destruction of the first world.
Wow. So if this happened during the Ice Age, then were they already underground at that particular time during the Ice Age, or did they wait until this cataclysm and then they were underground?
Well, it's interesting because the ant people are connected with this whole survival of the Hopi, because the ant people led them down into these caves and caverns so they wouldn't be destroyed. So, some of the people didn't make it, and they stayed above and then were destroyed by this cataclysm. Others went into the earth, into the Grand Canyon area, in fact, and there are a lot of caves down there.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And so, the ant people led them down there to these caverns where they kind of weathered this major destruction of the first world. And the ant people showed them how to sprout beans in these caverns. You know, the Hopi grow corn, beans, and squash today.
Yes.
But the bean, that you can sprout these in caves. And it's called the Bean Dance, and it's held in February. This commemorates the time that the ant people led the Hopi down into these caverns and helped them survive and taught them how to grow these beans in the caves.
Wow.
So nowadays they have this ceremony in the Kiva, which is an underground prayer chamber. It's a communal underground prayer chamber that kind of mirrors what the cave would look like, you know.
Oh my goodness.
And a lot of the Hopi perform these ceremonies in these Kivas that you get to by descending a ladder in the roof, and you're kind of going down symbolically, you're going down into the third world when you're going down this ladder into the Kiva. And there are many Kiva ceremonies, and one of these ceremonies is the Pawamu ceremony that commemorates the time that the ant people really saved the Hopi from getting blasted on the surface of the earth by this comet.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, wow. Now, I read another article, and I can't remember the Indian's name, but he was one of the chiefs from the newer Hopi tribe, I guess it would be. The article actually dated back in the 40s or something, where he was picked up by a person, a newspaper guy or whatever, and he wrote this article about the legend of the Hopi as I think his name was White Face or something of that nature, or White Feather maybe.
Yeah.
But he spoke about the legend, and he said that when the Hopi went down into the earth with the what he called the Anunnaki, I guess, which meant Ant Friend. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. But he claimed that they were like starving, and that the ant people actually shared their provisions to keep them from starving, and also taught them, you know, how to grow food and whatever, and they survived. But he didn't actually say for how long they were down there. Do you have any idea on that, or what the, how long it took them? Was it like generations, or?
It's funny about the Hopi that they're not really precise about time spans. You know, I consider the Hopi to be masters of space, and maybe the Mayas were the master of time, because the Maya had such precise calendars.
Right.
The Hopi, when you ask a Hopi about, well, how long did this take place? You know, how long were they down in the caverns? They won't be really precise about when it happened, because their whole way of thinking is not linear time like we think of it. It's more like circular time. And they just said, well, we were down there for maybe a couple generations, or, you know, they won't give you a straight answer, basically, because, you know, they're not going on a straight linear time scale. They're going in a circle, you know.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, you know, it's a challenge to communicate with Native Americans, because their way of relating stories is always circular, and you think, well, when is he going to get to the real meat of it? You know,
right.
But you know, eventually they come around and they tell you the answer to your question, but it takes a long time, and I think they're testing you to make sure that you'll hang in there.
And you're paying attention. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. So that's the first world, was the fire.
Right.
Okay, so what would the second and third world be then?
Well, the second world was destroyed by ice.
Okay.
Kind of perhaps a pole shift. Some Hopis claim that the Earth was thrown out of off its axis, and the Great Ice Age came. And you know, scientists, after this cataclysm of 12,800 years ago, scientists claim that there was a period period of deep ice and formation. They call it the Younger Dryas, a period that goes from 12,800 to something like 9,600 BC. A couple thousand years, it was, the Earth was kind of frozen up and everything turned cold. So the Hopi, their second world was destroyed, they claim, by ice. And they said that, this is a common theme in Hopi way of thinking, that the people kind of go downhill. Their society becomes chaotic. They become greedy, and they don't function by the ways of the Creator any longer. They're more concerned with their own needs and their own kind of greedy selves, and they're not praying to the Creator like the way they used to. So the Creator, kind of destroys the world, and the Creator destroyed the second world by ice. And the way he did it, he sent what's called the warrior twins, and he posted them on each North Pole and South Pole.
Oh my goodness!
And they so the Hopi had an idea of the Earth as a globe, right?
Yeah.
And this one warrior twin was posted at the North Pole, the other at the South Pole, and they kept the Earth revolving on its axis properly. But when Tawa said, well, you have to throw the axis off, they kind of
tilted the Earth.
tilted the Earth, and we had a pole shift. So the Hopi believed that there was a pole shift, and that caused this ice age. And people like, the scientist Charles Hapgood, has documented, all these pole shifts that we've had through the ages, and the Hopi confirmed that with their mythology. So, this is it's all falling in line. Science is confirming what the ancient people thought about, the ancient times, the what happened, in thousands of years ago and millennia ago. So.
Well, that's pretty amazing, because we know that, well, I say we know, it's been, between archaeology and mainstream science, they claim that there was a flash freeze, like almost overnight, at one point. And that's where, like, not the mastodon, but the woolly mammoth actually became extinct. And, like there was some that had migrated down as far as Texas, in the warmer climate, but yet they found bodies of them with food in their stomach, like they had been instantaneously just frozen. I've heard that. Buttercups still in their stomach. So it was a nice spring day, and then suddenly the blizzard hit, and that was it.
Froze them in their tracks.
Almost overnight or whatever. Within hours, I guess, or something. So. And this is, like I said, down south, in the warmer climates where it's 100 degrees in the summer and stuff. Even, in Arizona, it's the same way, well over 100.
Well, it gets to be 115, 120 where I'm at.
Exactly. So, depending on the time of year, which, who knows when, but that's pretty amazing when you really stop and think about it. I mean, that's wow, fast.
Well, that's a quick frozen, and apparently that happened. It happened over a very short period of time. If not in a day or so, it happened over a period of a month, where we went from this temperate climate to this very, very cold climate that a lot of the large mammoths didn't make it through. They couldn't find food to eat and so forth, and that was the end of the second world, according to the Hopi. The third world, again, this whole scenario played out, and people got greedy, and the society went downhill, and there was a lot of social chaos that was kind of like what we're seeing today. A lot of social chaos, and sexual mores are being violated, and just people are out for themselves, more or less. But this happened at the end of the third world as well. You know, after the people kind of got going in the third world again, this happened all over. The pattern repeated, and humans got greedy.
Right.
And this time, the Creator decided to send a great flood. So a great flood came across the earth, and of course there are stories all over the globe.
Oh, great deluge.
About the deluge, and you find this the epic of Gilgamesh. Thousands of years before Noah, and the biblical stories took place.
Yeah.
We find this too. So the Hopi have this idea of the flood. The Lakota up in South Dakota have an idea of the Great Flood. And Lenni Lenape and Delaware have an idea of a Great Flood. So it's really all over the continent. This time, the Hopi survived by getting on rafts, okay? Now, my book, Journey of the Serpent People, talks a lot about these ocean-going rafts that the Hopi migrated on. So the Hopi also have a tradition of migrating around the Pacific Ocean.
I was just going to ask you about that. Go ahead.
On these reed boats. In fact, the Hopi have a reed clan, and they also have a houseboat clan. A houseboat clan. And you think about, these desert farmers have this clan. It's called the houseboat clan. Now, how did they get that? But they have traditions of migrating from the west to the east on Pacific currents. And I did a little research into this, and it could be done because there are currents. They're called the equatorial countercurrents, and they're just north and south of the equator, about 10 degrees north and south of the equator, and they flow from west to east. They flow from like the Western Pacific over to the North American continent. And it's kind of like a conveyor belt in an airport. You hop on one of these conveyor belts and you're whisked down the concourse.
Right.
Faster than faster than you can walk. So this is the principle behind. They get on these currents and just float from west to east. And there's also the equatorial currents that go in the opposite direction, so they can make round trips.
Oh my goodness!
The equatorial currents, they could make a round trip. They could go from Indonesia and so forth, the Western Pacific over to, and the equatorial countercurrents. They end around Panama, and they kind of go up the coast of Western North America. And so, you could go that way and then take the return trip and go from east to west back where you came from. So the Hopi have these stories, legends of going across the ocean on these reed boats. And,
wow. That's amazing. Now, that's the first I've ever heard of that actual part of it. Now, that is totally amazing. And it brings me to mind when somebody else was talking about people in Peru and how they may have, went across and come back. And they did the same thing where they actually experimented by using one of these reed rafts. And they literally did that. And I'm talking in our time now, just not long ago. I wish I could remember the people that actually did it, but
I think you're thinking about Thor Heyerdahl.
Yes.
He did the experiment, the Kon-Tiki, and the Ra. He went across the Atlantic Ocean too on the Ra.
Yes. And it worked.
It worked. Yeah, it went. They went from South America over to the Western Pacific, and we found that like the sweet potato was originated in South America, but they find it in the Western Pacific as well. So they took some of the their food, the potatoes they took over,
Mm-hmm.
you know, from South America over to the islands in the Pacific. So, you know, there's a lot of evidence that points that I believe that, you know, ancient people got around much more than mainstream academia claims that they did. You know, mainstream academia says, well, these ancient people might have, you know, walked 100 miles or something, and that's about all the farther they went. And you know, their horizons were very narrow, and they didn't get around too much. But you know, I think it's kind of a denigration of the ancient people, that the knowledge that they were mariners in very ancient times.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a lot of the evidence of reed boats is destroyed because they just don't survive.
Right. Yeah.
And also, you know, any boats would be inundated with when the glaciers melted. You know, the sea level had been at least 400 feet lower, and then it suddenly, when the glaciers melted, it rose a good 400 feet.
Sure.
And it, you know, any of these coastal villages would have been inundated.
Mm-hmm.
And any evidence of boats or reed boats or whatever would have been lost. And then that's a problem, that a lot of the coastlines have just been flooded, and we can't get this evidence of these coastal people living quite nice lives in these areas.
Yeah, because anything like that definitely would have been underwater. Well, we know because of the cities and that they find now in ancient ruins and step pyramids and all kind of different things now that they find under the ocean. So we know that that's actually the truth. I mean, you know, the water definitely was 300 or 400 feet lower, you know, at one point or another. And now everything's underwater, and they find them all the time. I mean, they're still finding them, you know.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. So we definitely know that that's true. You know, it is sad that, you know, that mainstream science and, you know, won't get together on this, but they're so afraid of losing their credentials, you know, or being laughed at or whatever, that they have to stick to whatever. And I don't know who the main guy is that says, okay, this is how you're going to think, and that's it. You know, I don't know who it is that sets the bar for them. But apparently there is a bar, and they won't go below it or over it. You know, I don't get that.
Well, I think a lot of them are professors, and they want to keep their jobs, and they want to keep their tenure. I was in the university system for a while and taught in colleges and so forth. And unless you publish the acceptable dogma that archaeologists, you know, unless you toe the line, then you're gonna lose your job. You're gonna lose your tenure and your lifetime
benefit. Isn't that something? Wow.
And so, you know, I'm glad that I'm an independent researcher and I don't have to worry about it. I can write whatever I want.
Exactly.
And this new book, I'll do a little plug here.
Go right ahead. Absolutely.
For my book. This is Journey of the Serpent People. This is the new book, and it talks a lot about the migrations of the Hopi people, and from the Western Pacific. Also, the migrations around the continent. Like I said before, the Hopi went up into Canada, and there's evidence in my book, Journey of the Serpent People,
there you go,
of Hopi petroglyphs and pictographs, rock paintings and carvings up into Canada, Alberta, Canada. They found Hopi snake clan carvings.
Oh, that's amazing. So let me ask you this: how far do you think they actually went globally, or do you think they just stayed like in the northern part of, you know, from like Canada down to Peru or whatever, or do you think they actually went across and abroad? Could that be possible?
If you believe the Hopi Legends, they were a mariner society that traveled the oceans, that went across the Pacific Ocean, and you know, they might have had their origin in the Western Pacific, originally, and then moved over to the North American continent.
See,
so,
the only reason why I'm going to ask you this is because of all the underground facilities that they find, like in Turkey and different areas like that. And when you put the two together, and I've always tried to do this, and people laughed at me, but I often wondered if the Hopi weren't connected at that particular time, and these dwellings that they find, like the ones in Germany and the ones in Turkey that hold like 10,000 people, if this isn't one of their places that they originated from. And then, you know, I would really like to have the evidence to prove that theory, but that's something I've always had said, you know, and I don't know how correct I am, but, you know.
Well, you know, even the mainstream archaeologists in the late 19th century, early 20th century, in Arizona, there was a guy named Fuchs, Jesse Walter Fuchs, and he drew the parallel between the structures that the Hopi lived in and structures in North Africa, Tunisia, places like that, you know, close to Egypt. So my book talks a lot about this, about the parallels between, you know, the cliff dwellings and the structures that the Hopi lived in Arizona and those in North Africa. And in fact, there are some structures in North Africa, in Morocco and so forth. They have these kind of round structures that are sunken into the earth, and they live down in there. And in fact, one of the Star Wars movies, it's filmed at the Moisture Farm. You remember that?
Oh, yes. Yep.
Okay. One of those is one of these subterranean or semi-subterranean structures that are sunk into the desert. And the Hopi have very similar things with the Kiva. The Kivas were round and they were kind of sunk into the desert. So it's very similar structures. Also, the Dogon of the country of Mali, they lived in these cliff dwellings. And if you look at pictures of the Dogon dwellings, and you look at pictures of cliff dwellings in Arizona, they look almost exactly alike in their structures. So, you know, I think there was a lot of you know, not only from the Western Pacific, but Atlantic crossings in very early times. You know, I think people got around a lot more than you give them credit for.
Absolutely.
And I think that, you know, the ancient Egyptians are thought to have migrated to North America.
Yes, and the Grand Canyon too.
Yeah. You know, there's a story that I talk about in one of my books. Here, I'll get the book here in case. Here, this is Star Shrines and Earthworks of the Desert Southwest. Fantastic. And by the way, you can check out my website. It's called the OrionZone.com, TheOrion Zone.com. And I've got a lot of free articles you can download on there, a bunch of free articles. You have access to my book. There are maps on the OrionZone.com. You can see what I'm talking about as far as correlating my main theory, which is the Orion correlation theory, and that's a whole other thing. We haven't talked about it.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead.
But the maps, you can check out these maps, and apparently the Hopi built these villages in the pattern of Orion. Okay.
Just like the Egyptians.
Remember, I said that the Hopi lived on 3 primary mesas.
Yes.
In Arizona, and I came across this idea. You know, I had read Robert Bauval's book, The Orion Mystery, and a lot of your listeners are familiar with his theory that the pyramids on the Giza Plateau correspond to the belt stars of Orion.
Correct. Yes.
And I had read this book back in 1997, and I was going up to the Hopi Mesas to go to a Kachina dance, and I was driving from Winslow, Arizona, believe it or not.
A good song, yeah.
All right, just standing on the corner of Winslow, Arizona.
That's right.
And I was driving north from there on this arrow straight road, and you kind of start to daydream after a while, you know, getting tired of driving. So I thought, well, you know, I just read this book by Bouval, and he claims that the pyramids correspond to the you know, belt stars of Orion. Well, you know, there are 3 mesas the Hopi are living on. Maybe these 3 mesas correspond to Orion's belt, you know.
Oh, wow.
I put that in the back of my mind and went up and saw some of the Kachina dances, which maybe some of your listeners have seen Kachina masks or Kachina dolls or something. They're very bizarre, you know, creatures that the Hopi interact with on a regular basis. These kind of otherworldly creatures, and some of these masks look like helmets, you know, like space helmets or something.
Yes.
But you know, they have these and you could still go visit the Kachina dances and see the Kachinas dance. And I was going up there, and you know, I had this idea. Well, maybe there's an Orion correlation here in Arizona, and I put that in the back of my mind. And I got home, and I got out a map of Arizona, and I got out the sky chart, and started comparing the two. I said, well, you know, these 3 mesas correspond to Orion's belt, but also these outlying ruins that the Hopi had once lived in, they correspond to each star in the constellation Orion. So there's a one-to-one correspondence between each star and a village that they put on the Arizona desert.
So if you had the constellation Orion laid out, and in these places that they lived, you're saying that all the stars in that particular constellation would line up with these mesas. Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see, it's kind of hard to explain, but if you go to my website, the OrionZone.com, and there's a link that says maps on it. It's right at the top of the page. You go to that link, and you can see what I'm talking about. There's a one-to-one correspondence to all these ruins. You know, some the Hopi have abandoned, but the mesas they're still living on. You know, they're still inhabiting these mesas. But not only that, the left arm of Orion reaches over into the Grand Canyon.
Right.
So, you know, you have the whole constellation there, and it reaches over into the Grand Canyon, the place where the Hopi said they emerged from. You know, they climbed up out of the Grand Canyon, out of the Simpaponi I mentioned before.
Yes.
Yeah, and so, you know, I thought this was a compelling, you know, coincidence. You know, well, is it really a coincidence?
They claim there are no coincidences, yeah.
Right. So, you know, I started going to these sites and researching the sites, and I'll show you my book. This is the first book I came up with. It's called the Orion Zone.
There you go.
Okay.
Fantastic.
And this talks about each site and in detail. And I went to all these places and photographed them, and the ruins are very interesting ruins that you can visit to this day. Some of them are national monuments. You can go in and go into the cliff dwellings and go into the structures themselves. So, you know, I found this really compelling, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from Hopi elders talking about, yeah, this you know, the Hopi are not real forthcoming in verifying things because they've been ripped off so much by people just trying to take advantage of their
absolutely,
culture.
Absolutely. It's totally disgusting. Yes, absolutely. I definitely agree.
So they've kind of restricted the knowledge to a degree, but recently I think a lot of Hopi elders that I've come in contact with, they're starting to share more of their knowledge to the world, because they realize that the fourth world might be ending very, very soon.
Do they have any idea of what? I mean, do they predict, or do they just go with whatever happens? I mean, or do they have a natural...
Well, a lot of them think that the fire will come again. You know, the first world was destroyed by fire, the second world by ice, the third world was a flood, and they think that the fire will come again and destroy. There's this a legend of the blue star Kachina. You might have heard that.
Yes, absolutely.
When the blue star Kachina dances in the plaza, and he takes off his mask during the dance. And that would be unheard of, really, because when a Hopi dances the Kachina, he and it's only men that do the Kachina dancing.
Mm-hmm.
He becomes that particular spirit. He becomes the Kachina, and his own self and ego and so forth leaves him, and he's almost possessed by this benevolent spirit. You know, Kachinas are benevolent creatures.
Absolutely.
That assist the Hopi in agriculture and so forth. But you know, if a Kachina in the dance, and they're dancing along in the plaza, and they do this like all day long, dancing around in the circle and the constant drumming, and it's, you know, it's a very arduous thing, because you know, it gets over 100 degrees in the heat, and they've got these huge masks on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a very difficult thing to do.
That's dedication.
But you know, if a Hopi would take off his mask during the dance, that would be kind of like a priest in the middle of mass just taking off his vestments and just throwing them on the floor. You know, that
right.
And if that happens, then the Hopi believe that the whole ceremonial cycle will end and the fourth world will end. And a blue star will appear in the sky as a warning of this. And a lot of people have speculated, you know, there have been comets in the past and so forth, that maybe this is the blue star you know, warning us that the fourth world is nearly at an end. And then supposedly a red star will come, and the red star will be a purifier. And it doesn't sound very nice, really.
Right. It's going to purify, all right. Yeah.
If you don't have your ducks in a row, if you're not living by the ways of the Creator, according to the Hopi, then you might not survive the end of the fourth world. And like you said before, you know, there are many signs. This man Whitefeather, I believe you mentioned that before.
Yes. Yep.
He got a ride with this guy named David Young. It was back in 1958. In fact.
Okay, I was mistaken on the date. Okay, gotcha.
He was hitchhiking across the Arizona desert, and Whitefeather started talking with David Young. He was a minister that was traveling through Arizona, and Whitefeather said, "Well, you know, this world is almost at an end. Its fourth world is almost at an end, and there are certain signs that show that the fourth world is coming to an end." And he listed a lot of different ones. There's a whole list. There are 9 signs. Let's see, I have them written down here. He said that the Hopi, and they had these predictions for centuries, that people would come with sticks that struck like thunder. Okay, sticks that struck like thunder, and of course,
talking about guns, right?
They're talking about guns,
yeah.
And they also said that people will come in these cars or something, and they have wheels, and there'd be spinning voices in the wheels. Okay. And some think that these are covered wagons. You know, when the wagons revolve like that, you can kind of hear the creaking the sound.
Sure.
Others say it's a record or a CD. You know, spinning voices. And they said that this strange beast would come along. You know, the buffalo have short horns, but this strange beast would come along, and it would be a longhorn. They'd have long horns.
They have them in Texas.
Yep, the Texas longhorn.
Absolutely, you know? Yes.
So, you know, they predicted this stuff centuries ago, and they've carried this oral tradition through the years. And they said that, you know, like snakes of iron will be spread across the land.
The railroad.
The railroad, yeah. They believe that this represents the railroad. And also a giant spider web will be strung out over the land. Okay, a giant spider web.
Well, that would be the chemtrails that we leave, probably with jets and airplanes and stuff, I would imagine.
Yeah, that could be it. It could be, telegraph lines or
that too,
telephone.
yes. Yeah.
And, of course, now the World Wide Web,
Well, yeah.
I think prophecies, it's my understanding that the Hopi have a kind of a legacy of prophecy, but because they've carried these stories from the distant past and from one generation to another, and they sat in their kivas telling these prophecies. And finally, in the mid-20th century, the Hopi started coming out with these prophecies because they saw one of the main prophecies that they said that a gourd of ashes would fall on the earth, and many people would die because of this. And in 1945, when Hiroshima and Nagasaki occurred,
yes,
they said, well, our prophecies are coming true, that the gourd of ashes did fall on the earth, and many people died because of this. So they thought, well, it's time that we start being more open to spreading our prophecies to the world at large, because we don't have very much time left. But and they also said that one of the end time prophecies, according to the Hopi, would be when people started to live in the sky. So we have the International Space Station.
Yeah. Now, didn't they actually go to NATO or one of those conferences and actually?
They went to the United Nations. In fact, they went 4 times.
Okay.
Talking about these prophecies, and they call it the House of Mica. Mica is, of course, a clear mineral that you can see through, and settlers used to use mica for windows.
That's true.
But they called it the House of Mica, and they were actually talking about the UN building, this big glass
building. Sure.
And they went 4 times. And told their story of peace. Now, the Hopi are considered the people of peace.
Right.
So they were trying to warn the rest of the world about these prophecies that they had talked about for centuries. But the people at the UN, they just said, oh yeah, okay, native people, yeah, these primitive people are trying to just tell their stories and their myths, and they're not true, and so forth. And they went 4 times, and they were kind of ignored.
Yeah, that's so sad. Wow.
Yeah.
So sad. But there again, when you're talking, money people and whoever else is in that clan, I call it the clan, but when it comes down to the UN and things like that.
Yeah.
They think that they know everything, or they make the rules or whatever, and it's sad that that they wouldn't actually take heed or take warning. But if you believe in mainstream religion, regardless of what it is, basically it says that things will fall upon deaf ears, and that's one of the main things. So why not?
Yeah. A lot of the Hopi prophecies correlate to the Book of Revelations and so forth. So there are a lot of overlap between what the Hopi believe and things in the Bible, and it's I think we're living in very dangerous times, and who knows what will happen in the next few years as far as nuclear war or whatever.
Scary thought.
We're on a knife edge of danger, I think, and the Hopi, believe that some of the Hopi will be saved, and perhaps they can go down in the caverns again when the war starts. And because there are a lot of caves in the Grand Canyon area that they had visited for centuries.
Sure.
And that saved them a couple different times from these world destructions, these cataclysms.
Well, it seems to me that's going to be the place to be. That's for sure.
Well, the Hopi say if you're close to the Hopi Mesas, that you have a better chance of surviving. if you're in big cities and so forth, you want
right.
to
Yeah.
quite the the cities will suffer when if you can't grow the corn and so forth. If you can't be independent and be on your own, then you're going to suffer when the end times come.
Absolutely, I definitely agree with that. Yep. And I'm glad to be part of a farmer family-oriented thing myself.
What part of Minnesota are you located in?
Well, I'm in Chisholm, Minnesota now. I'm just about an hour north of Duluth, Minnesota.
You're way up there. Huh?
Yeah. And I'm a miner now, but I'm originally from upstate New York. That's where I actually originate from. And
I originally came from Cleveland, so
there you go.
the only Indians I knew about were the Cleveland Indians.
Right. And the baseball teams. That's cool. Well, hell, if you were in Cleveland, you weren't far from Columbus. Just an hour and a half drive south of you there is where the Serpent Mound was, or is, down there. And a lot of people...
the Serpent Mound, I in 2014... I went to Serpent Mound, and I gave a talk there at Serpent Mound, talking about the Hopi snake clan. Remember, I said that the Hopi went to the east. It went all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, in fact. And one of the places they stopped was Serpent Mound, and the snake clan went to Serpent Mound. So my book has a couple different chapters about the Hopi and their interactions with the tribes of the Ohio Valley, and how they helped construct and design Serpent Mound. And there's a lot of artifacts and so forth that they're both Hopi and the Adena and the Hopewell people in the Ohio Valley there.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Overlap. So, if you're interested in that, my new book, Journey of the Serpent People, goes into great detail about that. It's a 560-page book. It's got over 900 footnotes, and it has 250 or so photographs and maps and charts and star charts and.
Where can they find that book? Is that also on Amazon or?
Yeah, all my books. I have 6 books so far, and you can get them all on Amazon.com.
Fantastic.
I have an author page, Gary A. David, but just type in any one of the titles. You can go to my website and read little descriptions of each book, and there are links to the Amazon on there. I had 4 of the books published by Adventures Unlimited Press. The first 4 books were published by the publisher David Hatcher Childress.
Yes.
Who's been on Ancient Aliens quite a bit.
Yeah, lately. He's the main character there. Absolutely. Yes.
And I was on that program a couple times talking about the Orion correlation and in Arizona, and how the Hopi developed this correlation to reflect the stars of Orion. I talked about that on Ancient Aliens, and I've been on the Travel Channel as well. So and I've had shows in Russia, Japan, TV shows in Russia and Japan, and so
that's fantastic.
I was on George Nori Coast to Coast one time, Coast to Coast AM. So
I have to ask you, not to interrupt you. I'm sorry again, but when it comes down to all these places that you've been, and I know you've traveled through the Dakotas and different places like that, with their migration travels and stuff like that. What would you say is the one site that really puts it all together for you as far as, the Hopi and stuff?
Okay. Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'll be going back to Chaco Canyon in June. Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, in northern New Mexico.
Fantastic.
In fact, we're giving a tour of Chaco Canyon. We're going to different sites. We're going to the Hopi Mesas. It's going to be in June. June 18th through 23rd. We're starting from Sedona, Arizona. and we're going up to the Hopi Mesas. We're going to have a Hopi guide
wow.
talk to us about some of the rock art on the Hopi Mesas. And he's going to come with us to a place called Canyon de Chelly. We're going to take a jeep tour of Canyon de Chelly in Arizona. It's a beautiful canyon. And we're also going to Chaco Canyon, which Chaco is the largest ruin site in the American Southwest. It was a huge complex of stone pueblos that the Hopi, the ancestral Hopi had built, starting about 850 AD and running through 1150 AD.
Wow.
Period of habitation there. But that is an amazing site. We'll be there for the summer solstice, and there's a great kiva that you can see, and the sun rises and right into this great kiva, and you can see one of the shafts of sunlight go into a little niche in the great kiva, like a round kiva. So it's going to be quite a trip. You can find out about it on worldviewsmedia.com. That's the worldviews with a Z on the end of it.
Okay.
WORLDVIEWZ media.com, and you can check that out there. I think Chaco Canyon is the most impressive that I've seen, because it's so large. It has huge, thousands of rooms in these buildings.
Yes.
And it's out in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. I mean, there's no free-flowing river or anything, and you wonder why they build it out here in the desert like this.
Yeah. And why so high too? Why so high in the air and different things too? I mean, they talk about, it's really a hard place sometimes to get to as far as.
Well, a lot of that is these cliff dwellings took advantage of solar heating, and they're kind of under an alcove, and we'll be visiting some of these places, these cliff dwellings, that you can see their structures under this rock, kind of like a overhang, a huge overhang, but they did this for passive solar heating and cooling, basically.
Wow.
And they were very adept at positioning their buildings so to get the most sunlight in the wintertime and the least sunlight in the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
So they did that. They knew what they were doing, far ahead of us as far as solar heating and cooling goes. But there's this place, Chaco Canyon, in this whole template that I've found, the Orion constellation, but Chaco Canyon corresponds to the star Sirius.
Okay.
Brightest star in the heavens, Sirius, corresponds to the largest ruin site in the American Southwest. So, it's all right there. They positioned these villages exactly where they were supposed to be as far as projecting the constellations onto the desert. And you can see what I mean by going to my website, theorionzone.com. Just click on maps, and you'll see exactly what I mean.
Sure.
It's all there.
So not only did they did the bigger constellations, they also did in the desert also. So they kind of shrunk it down, so to speak.
Yeah, they did, and this is this whole pattern on the Arizona and New Mexico desert was intentionally built up through the centuries. It took a number of centuries because, like I said, they were migrating around and building these structures, and then they mysteriously leave these buildings. And, they wouldn't go back. They would just leave them. And I think the god Meza told them, well, it's time to move on, time to go to another place and build a certain village. So it's my belief that the god Meza, the god that I said that, had these big eyes and round mouth and looked like an E.T. Gray,
right?
He directed them where exactly to build these villages. so they could have this pattern on the desert. And even today, the most important constellation for the Hopi is Orion.
Is Orion, sure.
It's Orion because they synchronize their winter solstice ceremony by the constellation Orion. They go down into the Kiva, which I described before as going down the ladder in the roof of this Kiva, this underground communal prayer chamber. And they go down in there, and you can see the overhead hatchway during the winter solstice in December 21st. Orion goes about a little after midnight. It's right up above, and you can see. And the Orion would appear in the hatchway, and that would start the winter solstice ceremony.
Oh my goodness!
The shortest day of the year, when the sun returns. Now the Hopi believe that the sun sat in called the winter house for 4 days. Okay, and actually it does stop on the horizon. You know.
Okay. Yeah.
If you look at the sunrise through the course of the year, of course, in the summer the sun rises to the north on the horizon, but in the winter it rises to the south. To the south. And it goes the farthest south on December 21st, and it's in the winter house, and then it starts to move north, kind of edge every day. It rises a little farther north, and so it gets to the vernal equinox, March 21st, which
coming up.
What day is it?
Yeah,
it's coming up. Yeah, it's going to rise due east. You know.
Okay.
Due east on the horizon and set due west. So wow. the Hopi had, made their agricultural calendar correspond to where the sun rose on the horizon, and they knew exactly when to plant a certain type of corn, according to where the sun rose on the horizon. And there'd be the sun watchers, people designated by the tribe to watch where the sun rose on each day. You can see on the horizon there might be a butte off in the distance, and the sun rises right over the butte. Right. And at a certain time of year, and they knew when to plant the corn. There are different types of corn. It's sweet corn that's planted first, and then other types of corn planted later. And they knew, they had all this down as far as the calendar goes. So
that's amazing. Well, and what's really I'm not going to say odd or funny, but what's really amazing is if you're a farmer in today's society and you go to buy corn to planting your crops, they have a 90-day, 100-day, 120-day corn. And you would plant these corns, of course, in the cycle, just like what you're talking about. And that's pretty amazing when you stop and really think about it, how we probably picked up on this ourselves. And, this is what we come up with. It's pretty cool.
yeah, I think we have a lot to learn from the native people. And of course, they imported the corn from Central America. It was originally first grown down in Central and South America, and then imported north to the North American continent. And like I say, the Hopi were down in South America and down in the Maya territory. They had trade relations with the Maya, and they interacted with them. And some of the Hopi believe that some of the Hopi stayed down there and kind of merged in with the Maya people and became part of the Maya.
I was going to ask you that, if that was actually a thing that may have happened, because they say that they do find correlation between Hopi and Mayan together in some of these temple sites and stuff that they, it's like they merged two religions, so to speak.
I think that's true, because one example of this is the ball game. You've probably seen pictures of the Maya ball game. They use a rubber ball, and they hit it with their hips or their legs and so forth, kind of like soccer, in a way. But there are ball games, ball courts that have been found in Arizona, into the Hopi country. So this tradition of the ball game was maybe discovered by the Maya and it was imported north, or maybe the Hopi shared some of their traditions of the ball game and brought it to the Maya. It's hard to say which came first, but
that's amazing.
They've found ball courts all over, in the Phoenix area and into northern Arizona, around the Flagstaff area. There've been many ball courts found. So
that's really
this whole tradition is from the Maya region of Yucatan, and Central America.
That's amazing.
Guatemala and so forth.
Do you think that they? Well, I don't know. How do I put this? I wonder. Well, okay. Let me ask you this question. It's been said that part of the, and I hate the word indigenous, but that's what they call them. But there was part of that clan or that tribe that actually just up and disappeared off the face of the earth, so to speak. Any idea on that, or what the background is on that?
Well, there have been, like in 1300 AD, there was a great drought, and a lot of the sites that I've been talking about, like Chaco Canyon and places in southwestern Colorado, they were just cleared out. They're just abandoned. These beautiful cliff dwellings and beautiful structures, and they were just abandoned suddenly. But a lot of research has gone into genetics, and they've proven that these ancient people basically just moved from where it was drier to the more sources of water. So they went where it was wetter, because there was a major drought from 1275 AD to 1300 AD, and it was devastating. Wow. And it cleared out a lot of these drier places, and they moved to places like the Rio Grande Valley, and they moved to the Colorado River and the Little Colorado River as well. They moved to the rivers, basically, to escape this great drought. So, and this has been proven through genetics, that genetics of the contemporary Hopi people kind of match those of the bones that they found in these various sites across the Southwest. So it's, as far as, some people say, well, they were just taken in the mothership or something like that.
Right.
And, I don't really agree with that. That the Hopi do have interaction with extraterrestrial beings and Kachinas, and at least interdimensional beings.
Sure, absolutely.
That you can just look at the Kachinas and their otherworldly appearance, and know that these came from somewhere else. These came from another dimension or another star system or something. And the Hopi are very, very matter of fact about, yes, we have our star ancestors, they call them.
Right.
The ancestors that came from the heavens and taught us, how to grow corn and beans and squash, and and taught us all these cultural things that we needed to know to survive in the desert.
So just to clarify, and this is basically for my sake of mind, because as you may know, I'm really hyped up on the Anunnaki Ant Friend thing and stuff like that. But so their actual God, who may be a gray alien, let's say, or the one that actually came down and helped them or did whatever. And the ant people, now you honestly believe that they're both two different entities, that they wouldn't be the same entity as far as that goes, or two different?
Well, I think the ant people are different from Mathau, the god Mathau. Yeah, okay. the gray, he could be a tall gray alien, not the little guys. He'd be a very tall gray alien with kind of real thin arms and legs, and very long forearms and long feet. But, a huge bulbous head, and the big round eyes and a big round mouth.
Okay.
And that would be Mathau. And then the ant people would be maybe shorter and have antenna, because I've seen rock rock carvings of these creatures with antennas.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that the Hopi word Anu literally means ant.
Yes.
And the Hopi word Naki or Nakwatsveni means friend. So you put those two together, Ant Friend, Anu,
Anunnaki.
It's very close.
Very close.
And the ants are considered friends. They help them survive.
And look how they work. It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, the colony, you got the worker ant and you got the queen, whatever you want to call her, but yeah, I mean, if they were to compare humans to them, they'd win over. There's nothing lazy about them.
Their character as a culture, very much like the ants. They're very industrious and they're very prudent, and they want to do their ceremonies very precisely. Mm. And if they don't do the ceremonies the way they should, then the whole ceremonial cycle will start to grind to a halt. Right. And this is starting to happen. The young people are not learning the Hopi language, and they're not doing the ceremonies the way they used to with such precision. And it's a very complex ceremonial cycle that you have to prepare like 6 months in advance for a summer ceremony. You have to prepare in the wintertime for a summer ceremony and get all these. They make what's called prayer feathers, and they have to make certain, things for the ceremonies to take place. And they're always preparing for these different ceremonies at different times of the year. The snake dance is in August, and they have harvest dances in September and October. Mm-hmm. And like I mentioned before, the Poamu, the bean dance, or bean sprout ceremony, is in February. So it's always going on, this whole cycle.
Always a cycle.
But if they're not doing this as much as they used to, then they believe that the fourth world is going to kind of grind to a halt, and
that's going to be the end of it.
That'll be it.
You think the industrial age kind of took over, and of course with money and clothing and easy access to food and whatever, it probably took over and kind of ruined it for him, I guess, as you would say.
I think so, because the Hopi, they have to survive like anybody else.
Sure.
And the dances used to be according to when the moon was, and now they're on the weekend, so people can go to their jobs during the week.
Right.
And there's not that much to do on the reservation, so a lot of them have to go to Flagstaff and Phoenix and bigger cities just to get a job.
Okay.
And so and this is true of a lot of different reservations. I taught on the Pine Ridge Reservation, and this has one of the greatest pockets of poverty in the country. Mm-hmm. Shannon County and the Pine Ridge and Rosebud reservations. They're very poor, and there's not much to do as far as industry or so they have to leave. They have to go to the bigger cities in order to survive, because there's no buffalo to hunt up in South Dakota, and a lot of the Hopi down here in Arizona, they're not growing the corn like they used to, so. They have to kind of acculturate to the mainstream culture, and
right.
It's a tough way, because they're living in two worlds basically.
Sure.
They want to try to hold on to their ceremonies and their ancient ways, but they still have to survive as well, and it gets harder all the time to survive.
To survive. Sure.
Yeah.
That's really something. Wow. Well, Gary, I got to say it's an honor to have you here with me and stuff, and I get so in depth, especially with the things that you've studied, and I've watched a lot of your videos, and and I hope that the people listening and the ones that joined in and that get the understanding, of what has happened in the past and what's going on, and stuff like that. And I tell you, I am just so, like I said before, it's just so overwhelming for me because I've been talking about this forever, it seems like. And a lot of people just don't get it. And of course, I'm not very good with storytelling and stuff. And I'm just so happy that I kind of ran into you, in a sense that it was like, going to do my research. I'm like, if I can get Mr. David on here, this would be the ultimate deal all the way around.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to chat with you and just kind of, you have a great thing going here with your show, and hopefully the people will check out my website, theorionzone.com. As I said, you can download a lot of free articles there. You don't have to buy my book to, just check it out. And my stuff is on Amazon, so check that out too. So.
And what was the date again on this trip you're doing here in June?
June 18th to the 23rd. Yeah, the 18th to the 23rd.
Okay.
And it's starting in Sedona, Arizona, and we're going to go to Chaco Canyon and a couple other sites, the Hopi Mesas. And we're going to have a Hopi guide with us to tell us about his culture, and we're going to see some rock art and cliff dwellings, and it's going to be real fun trip.
Fantastic. Well, Gary, I tell you, I hope here in the near future we can get you back on again. There's so much I really like to talk to you. I like to get into like some of the glyphs and stuff like that, and some of the meanings. And I have another theory about like spirals and different things like that. But
that's the whole show.
Yeah,
right
absolutely,
there.
Absolutely, yes. So if I can, get you back on here in the near future, we can get into some of that. I think,
that sounds great. That sounds great, Clarence. I'd be happy to come on.
Very good, very good. So, I guess we'll say goodbye to you for now. And like I said, it's been such a great pleasure to have you on. And wow, I'm going back in and dive back into this again.
All right. Very good.
You've taught me a lot, no doubt.
Thanks, Clarence. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It really has. So I'm going to set this back here for people to see here, and we'll say hello to everybody and give them a quick wave here. And let them know that also tomorrow, Watchers Talk. Gary, I think you may be, you know who Omar is and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was on with Omar a few weeks ago, and it was
there you go.
Nice chat there I had with Omar.
Yes,
great. Yeah.
I'd like to mention
Bruce Cunningham was on there too. My buddy Bruce
that's
over
right.
the Philippines.
That's right. Yes, Bruce Cunningham. Fantastic. We're going to have an all-day show tomorrow with Omar, and I hope everybody joins us on that. And there's going to be like 7 guest speakers. It's going to be a pretty big show, and so we're combining. I'm co-hosting with him tomorrow, and that starts at 8:00 Pacific time. So if anybody's interested, and I hope they are anyway. But there's going to be a lot of different information and a lot of different people. So, if they would tune into that. But in the meantime, I want everybody, to take care of themselves and keep your eyes to the skies. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Clarence.
Okay.
Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.